Omagyantimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim yatripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for joining. We'll resume our discussion about the allegorical story of King Puranjan, 4th canto, chapter 25, verse 36. Dishtyagatosi bhadram te gramyam kamanabhipshase Udvishyamitam steham swabandhubirarindama. O killer of the enemy, you have somehow or other come here. This is certainly great fortune for me. I wish all auspicious things for you. You have a great desire to satisfy your senses. And all my friends and I shall try our best in all respects to fulfill your desires. So this is a conversation between Puranjani, or the future Puranjani, and Maharaj Puranjan. So we had earlier discussed how Maharaj Puranjan is looking for a suitable place to live in. And then he checks out different places. And then finally, on the south side of the Himalayas in the Bharatvarsha, he founds a suitable city, which essentially is the Jiva's quest to find a suitable form to enjoy in, and going through different forms until it comes to the human form of life. Now, when King Puranjan enters the city of 9 gates, then he comes across a very attractive young woman. And she's surrounded by paraphernalia. She's preceded by a snake. She has 11 attendants. And the attendants have, the 10 male attendants of the 11 have hundreds and thousands of female servants. And then it's explained how Puranjani is essentially material intelligence. Essentially dharmic material intelligence in the mode of goodness. The serpent in front of her is the pran, the life force. Then the 11 attendants, the one is the chief, which is the mind, and the 10 are the senses, the 5 karmendriyas and the 5 jnanendriyas. And the female servants for each of those 10 attendants are the object of the senses, the desires. So each of the senses have unlimited desires. So when Puranjan first sees her, he's very much taken in with her. He begins to glorify her beauty. He considers her to be like Lakshmi Devi or Bhavani or Saraswati. And then he considers that she is not celestial, but of mortal origin, because her feet are touching the ground. And he, in a subtle way, begins to propose to her. Are you married? Where are you from? I'm a great hero. So he starts basically indicating his interest in her and also demonstrating his own par excellence. So this is essentially the material jiva getting attracted to, or the conditioned jiva getting attracted to the material intelligence. And then we have discussed that this attraction, yadrisha, that on its own, causelessly, it happens. It's not inspired by any of the demigods, not inspired by Krishna, but on its own means that only by the desires of the jiva. It happens. And then we see Puranjani beginning to respond to the king, which is essentially material intelligence responding. We also discussed that how, even though the material intelligence is not sentient, because it's jada, it's just an aspect of matter. But in the allegorical story, it is shown as speaking, as live. So it is essentially speaking through its qualities. It is speaking through the aspects of his existence that attract the jiva. We were using an example of a car in a dealership, and the person comes looking for a particular kind of car, and of the many cars, one car will speak to the person that you're looking for something that is comfortable and goes fast and fuel efficient and all the gizmos are there. I am there, right? So essentially, it's the way that the car is speaking to the person. So in this verse also, the same point is being made, that Puranjani says to the king that, "O killer of the enemy, you have somehow or other come here." So this indicates her acknowledging that somehow or the other, the jiva gets a human form of life. In the other forms of life, intelligence is there, but very much diminished. And this point will be made by her later on. But in the human form of life, the intelligence is much higher. The self-awareness is much higher. So she says that by good fortune, somehow or else, you have come here. Right? So by good fortune, you have attained the human form of life. And then she says that, "I wish all auspicious things for you. You have a great desire to satisfy your senses, and all my friends and I shall try our best in all respects to fulfill your desires." Yeah, so she's saying that I will supply you with enjoyment. Right? So this is the function of the material intelligence, that it responds to the desire of the jiva to enjoy materially and provides material enjoyment. So she says, with my male and female associates. How does the intelligence provide enjoyment to the jiva? So the male associates are the senses, and the female associates are the object of the senses. So essentially, intelligence engages the senses in the object of the senses and provides enjoyment. So intelligence plays a crucial role, because the engagement of the senses with their objects is, it could be anything. It could be perceived as enjoyable. It could be perceived as degrading, as miserable. But it's the material intelligence that convinces the jiva that this is enjoyment. The story of Indra being cursed as a hog and enjoying that he's eating stool. So why was he enjoying? Because his intelligence was telling him that this is enjoyable. So that's what Puranjani is promising. that when your senses will engage with the objects, I will supply you with the enjoyment. I will convince you that this is pleasurable. So this essentially means that material intelligence provides the ability to the conditioned soul to enjoy sense gratification. So Prabhupada says that the material world is where the living entity comes for sense gratification, and his intelligence, represented by the woman, gives him the proper direction by which he can satisfy his senses to their best capacity. So this is essentially the point of synergy, that the Jiva is looking for enjoyment, and the material intelligence is providing that enjoyment. So this is where they come together, right? So out of his own free will, the Jiva will now take possession of material intelligence, because what he is looking for is what the intelligence is providing. It seems in an analogy with a car, that the person goes to the dealership looking for a certain kind of car. There is a car on the shop floor, that on the dealer's floor, that provides those features. Now the buyer takes possession of the car. So Prabhupada says Puranjan represents the ordinary living entity, and the woman represents the ordinary living entity's intelligence. Combined, the living entity enjoys his material senses, and the intelligence supplies all paraphernalia for his enjoyment. As soon as he enters the human form, the living entity is entrapped by a family tradition, nationality, customs, etc. These are all supplied by the Maya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the living entity, under the bodily conception of life, utilizes his intelligence to his best capacity in order to satisfy his senses. Okay, moving on. Imam tvam adhishtasva purim nava mukhim vibho mayo panitan grahananaha kama bhogan shatam samaha. My dear Lord, I have just arranged the city of 9 gates for you, so that you can have all kinds of sense gratification. You may live here for 100 years, and everything for your sense gratification will be supplied. So this one is clear to understand, that a conditioned soul enters into the material body, and then under the direction of the material intelligence, it enjoys sense gratification for the duration of its life, 100 years. So Prabhupada also comments, again, as I mentioned, Prabhupada also uses these as preaching points. So here, Puranjani is the cause of bondage for Puranjan. And Prabhupada comments that an ideal wife, on the other hand, can be the cause of the liberation also. So he writes that dharmartakam mokshanam dhara samprati hetavaha, samprapti hetavaha. That the wife is the cause of all kinds of success in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately salvation. When one accepts a wife, it is to be understood that he is being helped in his progressive march towards liberation. In the beginning of life, a person is trained as a brahmachari and is then allowed to marry a suitable girl and become a householder. If one is thoroughly trained in household life, he finds all facilities for human life: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Everything is there if it is executed according to regulative principles. Right? So, Prabhupada, again, from a preaching perspective, he's saying that this relationship between a man and a woman does not have to be perceived as one that is the cause of bondage, but properly situated can be a cause of liberation. So we see in the third canto, Kardum Muni, when he's praying to Lord Vishnu, he states that of the 4 ashrams, the Grihastha ashram is the safest. Why? Because in that ashram, the wife is the commander-in-chief. She protects her husband from fall downs, especially due to sex impulses. And she also assists in the practice of religion. Now, from a purely technical perspective, bhakti is completely independent of any material consideration. So we cannot say that a varna or an ashram is the platform for executing bhakti, because it would go against the definition of bhakti. It is spiritual, it cannot have any material cause. From a practical perspective, the material considerations can be conducive to the practice of dharma. So just like it's, one can chant better rounds in the morning than in the evening. So the time of the day is a material consideration. But from a practical perspective, it makes a difference. If a devotee is advanced enough, it does not matter. Right? Then he is completely independent. Morning, afternoon, evening, we'll enjoy similarly. But one who is trying to make advancement, the considerations make a difference. So in this way, for a conditioned jiva who's aspiring to make spiritual advancement, properly situated in a grihastha ashram, the consciousness is actually more advanced than that of a sannyasi. Because the sannyasi is renounced because of being deprived. The grihastha is renounced because of losing taste, because of being properly situated. So that's why a properly situated grihastha is as and can be considered more advanced than a renunciate. So an example that is given in terms of the ashrams is that if you're traveling on a highway, you can travel at a very fast speed. And if you're traveling on the local roads, you travel at a slower speed. So when you're traveling at a high speed, you can reach your destination quicker compared to the local roads. If you meet with an accident on the highway, the accidents are almost always very severe. If you meet with an accident on the local roads, they're mostly fender benders. So they have an accident, little bit of dent here, and then you continue on your way. But highway accidents, the car is total, the person is hurt. So in the sannyas ashram, you can make very rapid advancements. It's like traveling on the highway. But if you meet with an accident, gone. You leave the ashram, you're out of it, difficult to get back. In the grihastha ashram, you're on the local roads, you're traveling slowly. Even if there are accidents, they may be speed bumps. They will not be that severe. So that's where grihastha ashram is also considered to be the safer ashram. Okay, moving on to verse 38. Kam nutva danyam ramaye hayati gyam akovidam asampraya bhimukham ashvastana vidam pashum. How can I expect to unite with others who are neither conversant about sex or capable of knowing how to enjoy life while living or after death? Such persons are like animals because they do not know the process of sense enjoyment in this life and after death. So we see a little bit of difference in the mood. When Puranjan was talking to the woman, he had never asked for sex. He was more indicating that he's more glorifying her, that you are great, you're beautiful, and are you a demigoddess? Puranjan is more direct, right? So she's indicating that her desire is to have sex with Puranjan. So, which is saying, how can I expect to unite with others when they are not conversant about sex? So the most forward that Puranjan was, which was again indirect, is in the verse 32. His demeanor was characterized as adhirvat. Adhirvat means that he had become adhir. Dhir means one who is calm, collected. Adhir means that he had become impatient. Proper translation, impatient to touch the girl. So what does the sex mean over here? When Puranjani is saying that I would expect to unite with you. So in the material world, sex is conducted on a platform of lust. And lust essentially is mutual exploitation of the persons for the sake of one's own pleasure. So the man exploits the woman, not for the woman's pleasure, but for his own pleasure. And the woman exploits the man for her pleasure. Right? Compared opposite to love, where there is this mutual desire to serve the other. So lust is the opposite. So Puranjan wants to enjoy with the woman because he finds her attractive and a means to satisfy his own lusty desires. She wants to enjoy with him because she's saying that I do not find anyone else more suitable. So this is the mutually exploitive relationship between the Jiva and the material intelligence. The Jiva takes on material intelligence for his own sense gratification. The material intelligence comes together to the Jiva because the Jiva is sentient. The Jiva is the only one that can activate the material intelligence. The car may be surrounded by other cars, it may be surrounded by other living entities, but it is specifically interested in a driver because only a driver can drive the car. So only the Jiva has consciousness. So that is what material intelligence is looking for sentience. It lacks that. The Jiva has sentience, but it is looking for material enjoyment. On its own, the spiritual Jiva cannot enjoy in the material world. So it is looking at it to obtain it through material intelligence. So she states that after having found Puranjan as a suitable husband, she does not want to look further. So this indicates that even though she is lusty, she is chaste. An unchaste woman will continue to look for other avenues of enjoyment even after getting a suitable avenue. Like just like an unchaste woman, if she marries, so while she's married to a husband, she will look for paramours. That's the sign of lack of chastity. So here she says, after I get you, I don't want to look further. Right? So this is the sign of chasteness, chastity. Essentially, what it means that Puranjani is dharmic intelligence. So this is intelligence that follows dharma. And Vishwanath Chakravarti says that it is dharmic intelligence because it is chaste intelligence because it follows dharma mixed with rajas and sattva. It's not tamasic intelligence. So initially it was said that this is intelligence in the mode of ignorance. That was just to characterize it as material intelligence. So everything that is material is ignorant. But we know that within the material world, we are Sattva, Rajo, and Tama. So here she is demonstrating that she is sattvic and rajasic, not tamasic. So while stating her preference for Puranjan, she also criticizes four kinds of people. So some people, she says, are aratigam. Aratigam is they have no knowledge of sex enjoyment. So this is the planned form of life where one is completely ignorant of sexual enjoyment. So even though the jiva is still the same, the plant still has a jiva, but because of getting a plant form of life or because of karma that makes them suitable for a plant form of life, their consciousness has been fully covered. So she says, I'm not interested in such people, aratigam. Then she speaks about akovidam. Akovidam is that they are almost foolish. Now these are the jivas who get an animal form of life. So in the animal form of life, they engage in sex, but there is no enjoyment. They do it out of instinct for survival. Right? So they're just driven by their instincts. So they're almost foolish. They have sex, but without skill. So not interested. Then asampraya. Asampraya means without knowledge. Prabhupada translates it as next life. Vishwanath Chakravarti translates it as without knowledge of battle. So without knowledge of battle is pointing to the Brahmanas and the Vaishyas, that they can enjoy in sex with skill, but they are without courage. Without courage means they lack the valor. And the fourth kind is Ashvastana Vidam, that one who do not know what is happening in the next life. So this is pointing to the Kshatriyas. So the Kshatriyas have courage, but they do not know what will happen tomorrow or next day. So they lack the spiritual knowledge that the Brahmanas. So being without dharma, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that they are like an animal. Now, one can understand Puranjani rejecting the plant and the animal form, but the human form, they have the same kind of intelligence. Whether it's a Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, and here she has rejected the Brahmanas and the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas, does not mean that only the Shudras have material intelligence. The Brahmanas are also in the same category. So are the Vaishyas and Kshatriyas. But essentially what she is saying is that this is the quality of the Jiva that attracts material intelligence. So enjoying sex with skill essentially means that the Jiva has a strong desire to enjoy materially. When it's said that she rejects those who are without courage, what is the courage that she's talking about? The courage to leave their spiritual source and take on a material form. Right? So from the spiritual perspective, it is a fall down. But from her perspective, it's an act of courage. Right? It's like when a son leaves the parents' house, from the parents' perspective, it's a bad situation for the son. But there is a gang down the street that is waiting to recruit its son. That says, "Oh, good job! You've done a courageous act." And having knowledge of what is going to happen later indicates that there is some kind of introspection. Because if a human being is just living day to day, they're living like animals. But when a person has this understanding of planning enjoyment, of being deliberate about, at this stage I will enjoy this, at this stage I will enjoy this, they can actually engage a lot more with the material intelligence and enjoy the sense objects, which is what we will see Puranjan doing in the later part. Okay, moving on to the next verse, 39. Dharmo hatyartha kamo cha parjanandamritam yashah loka vishokha virja yana kevalino viduhu. The woman continued, in this material world, a householder's life brings all kinds of happiness in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and the begetting of children, sons and grandsons. After that, one may desire liberation as well as material reputation. The householder can appreciate the results of sacrifices, which enables him to gain promotion to superior planetary systems. All this material happiness is practically unknown to the transcendentalists. They cannot even imagine such happiness. So what we see Puranjani doing, so initially she was rejecting people who were very low on the scale of consciousness. Now she is rejecting people who are very elevated in the scale of consciousness. So she says, I'm not interested in spiritualists. It does not mean that the spiritualists are without intelligence. They are without material intelligence because they are developing or they are recovering their spiritual intelligence. But from her perspective, she's condemning them. She says they cannot even imagine such happiness. What happiness? That the grahastha experience of dharma, arth, kam, and so she glorifies the householder life, which gives dharma, arth, and kam. Right? But if you look at it, she says dharma, arth, kam. She does not mention moksha, which is the pursuit of transcendentalist. So sattvic intelligence. So we were initially saying that Puranjani represents sattvic intelligence that is mixed with rajas. And the reason is that purely sattvic intelligence is being criticized over here. Right? So she does not aspire to drive the jiva towards transcendence. Right? So she's criticizing, and she's only recommending the first three goals: dharma, artha, and kama. So she's appreciating those who follow the pravritti mark and criticizing those who follow the nivritti mark. Because factually speaking, pravritti mark is based on sex life. Right? The whole process of enjoyment begins with sex life, and she has indicated right from the beginning that she's looking for somebody who is expert in sex. So from the metaphor point of view, she said, I'm interested in a man who's interested in sex. Those who are following the transcendental path are not interested in sex. So no synergy between the two of us. So material intelligence is looking to attract the jivas who are trying to enjoy materially. It has no attraction for the jivas who are aspiring to progress on the path of spirituality. So it's not that the transcendentalists lack intelligence. What they lack is material intelligence, because material intelligence has no attraction towards them. So Prabhupada says that those who follow pravritti marg are called gramadis. And the nature of material enjoyment is to steer the jiva towards a situation where the opportunities for sensual enjoyment are the most. Right? Now, those who follow pravritti marg, they still follow the Vedic injunctions. So they are not adharmic. They are dharmic. That's where that mode of goodness in the intelligence, the chastity is still there. Mixed with rajos, because the mode of goodness is to enjoy religiously. So Prabhupada says that the grahastha desires sense gratification, and he acts according to the Vedic instructions. The Grahmedi, however, is only interested in sense gratification and does not follow any Vedic instruction. The Grahmedi engages himself as an advocate of sex life and also allows his sons and daughters to engage in sex and be deprived of any glorious end in life. A Grahastha enjoys sex life in this life as well as in the next life, but a Grahmedi does not know what the next life is because he is simply interested in sex. So the transcendentalists, they state that an ocean of Vishayanand is enjoyment in the material world, that an ocean of Vishayanand cannot compare to even one drop of Brahmananda. Brahmananda is having enjoyment in the Brahman, spiritual enjoyment. So an ocean of material enjoyment is no comparison for a drop of transcendental enjoyment. However, material intelligence takes an opposite view. So what material intelligence dictates? That the enjoyment available in sensual enjoyment far, far exceeds a life of denial of the senses by the spiritualists. Okay, so it takes an opposite view. Same point made by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita in 2nd chapter, where Krishna says that what is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for introspective stage. It's essentially saying what is day for one is night for another, and vice versa. We see that in play over here. Okay. So I'll do one more verse, and after that we'll pause for discussion. Pitradev Risi Martyanam Bhutanam Atmanaschaha Kshemyam Vadanti Sharanam Bhavesmin Yadrahashmaha. The woman continued, according to authorities, the householder life is pleasing not only to oneself, but to all the forefathers, demigods, great sages, saintly persons, and everyone else. A householder life is thus beneficial. So she's continuing with her glorification of the Grahasthashram, that in the Grahasthashram, there are many rituals that are performed to repay the debts of the forefathers, the sages, the demigods, the king, other living entities. So it's not only pleasing to the person, but it is pleasing to all of these people also, to the Pitras and the Devas and the Rishis. So the danger, she says, that if you don't go to the Grahastha ashram, is that you will remain a debtor to these people. And then you will have to suffer the consequences. And what does she say? According to authorities. Which means that what she is saying, that according to the scriptures. Right? So essentially, what she is saying is true. That according to the current portion of the scriptures, this is the recommended path. That you enter into the Grahastha ashram so that you can repay the debt that you're born with. So earlier on we saw that Puranjan was trying to seduce the woman. Now we see the woman is trying to seduce Puranjan. So earlier on he was presenting himself, I'm a king, I'm a great hero, I'm attracted to you. Now she is, in a more subtle but in a more elaborate way, is convincing Puranjan that for his own benefit he should accept her. Right? So she's giving these reasons. Prabhupada in his purport, he once again comments on the external storyline, and he compares a Grahastha ashram with a Grahamedi and a transcendentalist. Right? He says that we are also indebted to our forefathers who gave us these bodies, paternal property, intelligence, so on. Since we are indebted to the general public for politics and sociology, we are also indebted to lower animals such as horses, cows, asses, dogs, and cats. In this way, as soon as one is born in this material world as a human being, he has so many obligations and is bound to repay all these obligations. If he does not repay them, he is further entangled in the process of birth and death. The Grahamedi, however, so this is the first part which Puranjani is saying, which is how a Grahastha looks at this situation. And what does the Grahamedi do? The Grahamedi is overly addicted to material things. Does not know that if he simply takes shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, he is immediately free from all obligations. Prahlad Maharaj says that Martina Krishna Pratha Svatova Mitho Vipaddeta Graha Vartana. That a Graha Vrat is the same as a Grahamedi. One who takes sex life to be the supreme finds action in Krishna consciousness confusing. So Prabhupada talks about all three. The one who is aware of these obligations, and then he goes through the necessary rituals to repay it. There are ones who are not aware of these obligations, and they are essentially simply living like animals. And then the third is that those who realize that simply by surrendering to the lotus feet of Mukunda, there is no obligation that remains. So the whole purpose of the Karmakand part of the Vedas and the Grihastha ashram is to regulate sense gratification, right? So sense gratification is like adding salt to your food. If you do not add salt, then the food is bland. If you add too much salt, it is unpalatable. So only in the right amount, it will make the food tasty. So similarly, sense gratification excessive in the human form of life will destroy it. Too less will make it difficult to live. So in the right amount, it makes the life enjoyable. So and essentially this is the Karmakanda view of it. Not necessarily the spiritual, the transcendentalist view, but the Karmakanda view. And for the spiritualist, the material engagement is always a means to an end, right? Whether it is little or more or medium, it's always a means to an end. How best I can serve Krishna, right? So they're not even eating that food. So they don't care about the salt, right? They're eating some other food. So it's in a different platform. Okay. So let me pause here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Sorry. The interaction between Puranjana and the lady Puranjani, that is the interaction between the Jiva and the intelligence, right? And now the later part that you have been explaining how in the beginning the king was seducing the lady, but then eventually the lady was seducing the king. So how do we correlate to that in terms of Jiva versus intelligence? That first Jiva is attracted to material intelligence, and then the intelligence starts to seduce. I think you mentioned about the car example. Probably that can be the better way of understanding, I guess. So I was trying to understand how to understand that. But anyway, just as I was asking the question, I thought I remembered the analogy that you given. I don't know whether that is the right way to understand.
Correct, Prabhu. That's what I was trying to explain, that the material intelligence is jada. It's just sitting over there, but it is seducing through what it offers. So it's offering an opportunity to the jiva to get material senses. It's offering sense objects. It's offering the ability of the jiva to engage with matter and enjoy, right? So that's the way it is attracting the jiva. It's seducing the jiva. And the seduction of the jiva to the material intelligence is the thought process through which the jiva is going when it is looking at material intelligence. That this is what this will offer me. So that's why it gets attracted to material intelligence. So even so, in the allegory, there is an active seduction going on, but what it represents is essentially the attraction of the jiva towards the material intelligence, and then the qualities of the material intelligence that attract the jiva. The material intelligence, it's as I mentioned, it is looking for, just like a car is looking for a driver, the material intelligence is looking for consciousness, which the jiva offers. So when you have a socket and a plug, then they can only fit together when the socket is reciprocating with exactly what the shape and the form and the specs of the plug is, right? That's the mutual seduction that's going on. It's being animated in the story to indicate, basically to explore the more subtle aspects of it, and also to make it more make it less of dry philosophy and make it more of a story. If you remember, in terms of allegories, there's a humorous allegory between Maharaj Yayati and Devyani, right? It's in Mahabharata that when Puranjan had enjoyed, not Puranjan, sorry, Yayati had enjoyed with Devyani for a very, very long time. He had taken the youth from his son and enjoyed for a very long time. And then one day he calls her over, and then he talks about the story of this he goat and she goat, and the he goat was attracted to the she goat, and they had many goats. So essentially he's talking about himself and his wife. But it's a humorous allegory. It talks about many of the more subtle aspects of the futility of material enjoyment, the initial attraction, etc. So the same way, this allegory is animating a lot of the more subtle aspects for the sake of clarity, and also to some extent for the sake of humor, to attract the attention of the reader. Okay, any other thoughts?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu. The clarification in the other analogy you gave, like where highway and the local, right? Where we are saying the Grihasthashram is the safest. And also, you also said a key point. In order to repay our debts based on our karma, we take that kind of shape. So how to understand the life of brahmachari, or who is not even sannyasi? What are they trying to? They are also trying to repay their debts with that.
In the Varnashram model, Prabhu, the brahmachari life is training to enter grastha. So in order to be a good grastha, the training is in the brahmachari life, because grastha, you have opportunities to enjoy indiscriminately. In the brahmachari life, they are taught sense control. In grastha, the focus is a lot on the material aspects, but in the brahmachari life, the spiritual aspects are taught, so that always stays in the consciousness. So that's the training. In the Varnashram system, the brahmachari life is not meant to be in itself, right? It's not meant that a person stays a brahmachari for the entire life. So they stay brahmachari, and when, like Prabhupada says, when properly trained, enters into the grasthashram. Does that answer your question? Did I understand your question correctly?
Yeah, that maybe is, yeah, to a certain extent, but that was not the core of my question. Basically, what I realize is, based on their debts to repay, brahmachari, I understand it is brahmachari to a grihastha transition. But my question is relatively, who doesn't even kind of enjoy the grihastha ashram, but he's not even a sannyasi, right? And probably against the repay of the debt. Maybe I'm complicating the question, but
no, I think you're in the right. I mean, that's the way I would understand. Also, it's like, it's like you're being brought up in a family. Your parents are investing money in you, so you can't start repaying them right away. You have to go to school, get an education, become qualified to get a job. Then you start earning money and repaying them. That's brahmachari ashram. That you get ready to become a properly qualified grastha. Then within grastha, you do all the with the proper consciousness, you do all the necessary rituals so that you can repay the debt.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Okay, there are no other points. We can continue. So verse 41. Kanamir vikyatam vadanyam priyadarshanam na vrinita priyam praptam madrasi tvadrasham patim. Oh, my dear hero, who in the world will not accept a husband like you? You're so famous, so magnanimous, so beautiful, and so easily gotten. So previously, Puranjani was speaking in general terms. What is it that attracts her? Right? She was saying that what attracts me is a person who is expert in sex. What attracts me is a person who has sufficient awareness of past, present, and future. What attracts me is a person who is willing to live in a grahastha life, material enjoyment. Right? Now she is being specific. Now she's talking to Puranjan directly. That you have the qualities, my dear king, that make you desirable to be a husband for me. So in other words, the quality of the jiva conditioned for material enjoyment naturally attracts material intelligence towards him. It's a synergy. So she's, and again, Puranjani may be flattering, but she is not lying. There's a difference between the two. So she's saying that you're so famous. What is she talking about here? So this is the famous Jiva. And like it is said, in this entire creation, the whole material world, spiritual worlds, there are only two beings, Krishna and Jiva. Right? So Krishna is God and the Jiva is famous as being the only other being in existence other than the personality of God. Right? So we are Jivas, we take ourselves a little for granted, but a Jiva is a very, very, it's a very, very special form of benediction. Think of it, Jiva, eternal, can never die, eternal relationship with the personality of Godhead. So material intelligence is looking at Jiva and saying that only you are uniquely situated in this whole creation. So Krishna is obviously beyond her because Krishna is her cause. So she's saying you are so famous, you are so magnanimous. Magnanimous, why? Because she's hoping that he will accept her. So beautiful, so easily gotten. Conditioned Jiva is itself frantically looking for material intelligence. So easily gotten means that the Jiva, the intelligence does not have to work hard. There is a natural synergy between the famous Jiva and material intelligence. Prabhupada again, he comments on the storyline and he says that even if the husband is ugly, even if the husband is not very powerful, the wife will consider the husband to be a hero, to be the most beautiful, the most magnanimous. Once a disciple asked Prabhupada that there are so many gurus. How do I know that which guru is meant for me? And Prabhupada said that you go through the process, the process of mutual trying out, have the guru try out the disciple try out the guru. And then he said that once you take shelter of the spiritual master, he should be the only spiritual master for you. And then he gives this analogy that once a man marries a woman, then she is the only woman for him. For him, she is the most beautiful woman. She is the most talented one. She has the most qualifications. Now, there may be other women who are more beautiful, more talented, more qualified, but for the husband, it is only the wife. That's the secret of happy marriage. That's the secret of a happy guru-disciple relationship. If the disciple goes guru shopping, that I remember once in our Namhat, there was a person who had come and he was, I guess, searching. And so we were encouraging him to take shelter. And then at some point, he developed this mentality that this sannyasi, he's very expert in the scriptures. But that sannyasi, he does very good kirtan. And the other sannyasi, he's more approachable, right? And then we could see that his mentality was becoming offensive. So he was becoming more and more looking at the external manifestation. And we kept saying that you look for it from a relation perspective. That does this guru satisfy your need to make spiritual progress? But he was looking at it from a perspective that, oh, this sannyasi is famous. He has so many disciples. Oh, but this sannyasi, he knows so much about the scriptures. And he left after that, as far as I know, never took initiation. That mentality was there. So back to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada is making this point that for a wife, the husband is the hero. Right? So he satisfies her maternal instincts by providing her with children. So he becomes beautiful in the eyes of the wife, and she dedicates her life to him while she provides him with all kinds of enjoyment. Same relationship between the Jiva and material intelligence. The material intelligence considers the Jiva to be the hero. The Jiva gives the material intelligence consciousness, and together they aspire to get all kinds of enjoyment. Okay, so we go to verse 42. Kasya manaste bhuvi bhogi bhogya striya nasaje bhujayor mahabhuja yunartha vargadhim alam grunodata Smitavadokena charatyapohitam. O mighty arm, who in this world will not be attracted by your arms, which are just like the bodies of serpents. Actually, you relieve the distress of husbandless women like us by your attractive smile and your aggressive mercy. We think that you're traveling on the surface of earth just to benefit us only. So, purport of this verse is that when the Jiva with its consciousness comes, not only does intelligence get shelter, but other things also get shelter. So she talks about that not only do I get shelter, but other things also get shelter, right? So So she says that which woman will not take notice of the strong arms of Puranjan. He travels to give shelter to unsheltered women like me by his smiling glances. Thus he is a man of extraordinary mercy. So Prabhupada, he explains this by talking about the psychology of a man and a woman. So the nature of the spirit soul is feminine, right? So we know that Krishna is the Purush and Jiva is Prakriti. So Prakriti is that is enjoyed feminine. In the embodied state, the soul acts according to the nature of the body. So whether it's a male body or a female body, there is no glorification or condemnation, right? What is being condemned is the soul taking on a body. Right? So it's not that when a soul takes on a material body, it is glorious. When a soul takes on a female body, it's condemned, or vice versa. But what is being condemned is just the soul taking a material body, right? So one person may be driving a sports car, other person may be driving a passenger. Both cars have certain strengths and weaknesses, right? So sports car may be able to drive fast but consume a lot of gas. A passenger car is more there. But essentially both of them are doing the same thing, that they are giving up their independence and sitting in the car and allowing the car to drive them, right? In that sense, that activity is condemned. So amongst, and this is just an example, amongst the Pandavas, Yudhishthira Maharaj was famous for his deliberation. Like he would think deeply before doing anything from all perspectives, material and spiritual, scriptural actually more, he would do it. Bhima was famous for his impulsiveness, that he would react to the situation first and then think. Now, there are certain situations in which Bhima is glorified. Like during the battle of Kurukshetra, Bhima was the one who was the most effective, even more than Arjun, in killing the enemy soldiers. Right? His instinctive desire was to fight, or when he was fighting with Jarasandha. Right? Then there are other situations in which Yudhishthira's thoughtfulness is being glorified. Like when it came to forgiving Ashwathama, or when there is the Yaksh Vartala, like the Yaksha was saying, don't drink water. And Bhima said, forget about it. All the other four Pandavas, and they drank it. Yudhishthira was the only one who stopped and listened and asked questions, etc. But despite these differences, the Pandavas were famous because of the bond between them. Right? So, for instance, when Draupadi was kidnapped, first Bhima immediately acted and rescued Draupadi from Jayadratha. Then Bhima wanted to kill Jayadratha, and then Yudhishthira intervened and he stopped that. Right? So together they made a potent king. So in the same way, the male and the female bodies, they have their own strengths and weakness. But when they come together in the proper spirit, then they compensate for each other's strength and weakness and achieve much greater overall strength. So Srila Prabhupada notes this based on context, that in some cases, he will note that the strength and the weakness of the male body, and in some cases, he will note the strength and the weaknesses of the female body. Not that he is trying to condemn the male body or the female body, but in the larger perspective, he's trying to make this point that being aware of the strengths and the weaknesses and coming together to complement them is the secret of success of Grahastha. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the word Anarth Varga is significant in this verse. Nath means husband and Anath means without. So a woman who has no husband is called Anath, meaning that one who is not protected. As soon as a woman attains the age of puberty, she immediately becomes very agitated by sexual desire. It is therefore the duty of the father to get his daughter married before she attains puberty. Otherwise, she will be very much mortified by not having a husband. Anyone who satisfies the desire for sex at that age becomes a great object of satisfaction. It is a psychological fact that when a woman at the age of puberty meets a man and the man satisfies her sexually, she will love that man for the rest of the world. So this essentially is Prabhupada, again, is commenting on the external storyline. He's basically making the point that early marriage, that's like now it's called child marriage, condemned, but early marriage is recommended because while that woman is developing that desires, she has somebody to focus that desires on, who eventually will become her husband. So the way child marriage works is that at a young age, the woman and her husband are married, but they don't live together. But the woman is aware that this man is my husband and vice versa. And when they reach of age, then they start living together. I think when Prabhupada was married, his wife was 10 years old or 12 years old. And then at later point, she came and lived with him. So in this purport also, Prabhupada writes something that is considered to be controversial. He says that in this regard, the word Vikyatam is very significant. A man is always famous for his aggression towards a beautiful woman, and such aggression is sometimes considered rape. Although rape is not legally allowed, it is a fact that a woman likes a man who is very expert at rape. Right? So it's a statement that I've seen that for people who have read it, they come up. It appears that Prabhupada he's supporting rape. That when a woman is raped, she actually likes it. There is a small discussion on this by Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. He gives a lecture on this in which he talks about what Prabhupada actually means when he says that. And I mean, if you're interested, I can send you the link. But Prabhupada basically says that I think you have to look at the words in the context that they come together, and like the woman likes. So when the notion of woman likes is there, they cannot be raped because the rape is against the likes of a woman, and the man is expert at it. So man is expert at it means that woman likes when a man is expert at satisfying her. There's also a very long article. It's a 39-page article that's been written by a devotee. Now, I personally don't know that devotee, but whatever he seems to write seems to according to scriptures, which essentially talks about this some more. Okay, so moving on. Verse 43. Naraduvacha iti twadam pati tatra samudya samyam mitaha tam pravishya purim rajan Mumudate shatam samaha. The great sage Narad continued, my dear king, those two, the man and the woman, supporting one another through mutual understanding, entered that city and enjoyed life for 100 years. So after this mutual attraction of the Jiva and the material intelligence is established, together they enter into the city. So the meaning is clear that the conditioned Jiva and the material intelligence, together they come into the material body, the city of 9 gates. Together they come in this gross material body, and there they enjoy life for 100 years. Prabhupada says 100 years is significant in this connection because every human being is given consciousness to live up to 100 years. And then he says the 100 years may be different at different planets. For Brahma, the 100 years is much longer. For the demigods, it is long. For the human beings, it's 100 years. But essentially, they live for 100 years, and after that, they leave the body. So this is essentially describing enjoyment in the waking state. The next verse will describe enjoyment in the other stages. Verse 44. Upgyamano lalitam tatra cha gayakaha kridan pravivrata strivi radhanim avishakshushu avishakshuchau. Many professional singers used to sing about the glories of King Puranjan and his glorious activities. When it was too hot in the summer, he used to enter a reservoir of water. He would surround himself with many women and enjoy their company. So this is describing the enjoyment in the other states of consciousness. So the Jiva exists in 4 states. There is the waking stage, the Jagrat, the dream state, Swapna, then the deep sleep, which is Shushupti, and then Turiya. Turiya is the transcendental state. The previous verse talked about the Jagrat state that enjoyed for 100 years in the fully conscious state. Now the dream state is described. So it said that he would play with women. Playing with women is describing his dreaming state. So previously it was said that the woman had that each of the man had 10 women servants. 10, and there were 10 servants, and each one of them had unlimited woman attendants, which represented sense enjoyment. Because the senses do not function in the dream state, the actions continue by the impression of these senses, right? So when a jiva is sleeping, then the senses are not active, but the senses are still active in the dream state. So it's the impression of the senses that are active. So when it is said that Puranjan was enjoying many women, he's essentially enjoying his sense objects while asleep. Again, by a function of the intelligence. So providing enjoyment while he's awake, providing enjoyment while he's asleep. Now the verse also describes the stage of Shushupti, the stage of deep sleep, where there is no dream. So the metaphor is that when he enters into the river, so Hridanim Avishat. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad explains that the river is the space in the heart where the Jiva resides during deep sleep. And Suchau means during the summer or during deep sleep. The fourth state, which is Turiya, that is not described here because material intelligence has nothing to do with it. Right? So essentially, the existence is divided in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. When he's waking, he is with the material intelligence, enjoying with the senses. When he's dreaming, then he is enjoying with the impressions of those senses based on his desires. The only time that he gets some relief is when he enters into deep sleep, because then both the gross and the subtle engagement with the senses is suspended. Right? So it said that when it was too hot in the summer, he used to enter a reservoir of water. So when the Jiva becomes too exhausted, too tired pursuing the senses and the sense objects, then at that time, the deep sleep comes to the rescue. And that gives the Jiva relief. Even in contemporary science, it is said that a certain amount of deep sleep is very important. I think they call it REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is considered to be deep sleep. And apparently, that's when the body rebuilds itself, the immunity system builds itself, the cells repair. So just from a physical perspective, it's considered to be important. And those people who are not able to get good quality of this deep sleep, eventually the body starts acting up. Here, of course, it's mentioned more in terms of the relief to the Jiva. So I'll stop after this verse to see if, after the next verse, to see if there's any discussion. So Prabhupada in this verse says that a living entity is never satisfied with a woman unless he is trained in the system of brahmacharya. Generally, a man's tendency is to enjoy many women. And even at the very end of life, the sex impulse is so strong that even though one is very old, he still wants to enjoy the company of young girls. That's because of the strong sex impulse, the living entity becomes more and more involved in the material world. Again, this is Prabhupada commenting on the story. Okay, so actually I'll stop here because the next section is, it begins to describe a new aspect of the engagement, which is the city of 9 gates. So I'll stop here and see if there's any points of discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You talked about the fourth state. The first one is Jagarti, Jagarti, which is the wakeful state, and it's Swapna, which is the dream state, and Susupti, which is deep sleep. And then you mention Turiya, that's the word Turiya, because the word is not mentioned here, and you describe that as the transcendental state. What does that mean, the transcendental stage in this context?
So Vishwanath Chakravarti mentions Turiya. So essentially what that state is, where there is no engagement of the senses with the object of the senses from a material perspective. Right? In other cases, there are varying levels of engagement. But in Turiya, which is transcendental state, there is no engagement of the sense with the objects in the mode of enjoyment.
Thank you for that. Regarding this point that you were making here in text number 42, in the purport, where the aggression of a man towards a woman is explained, and in the previous verse also in 41, the last paragraph 41, the question of rape. You said it's a controversial topic. Actually, the big controversy, especially by one group of ladies, at least in Latin America. They refer to themselves as feminists, and they went to the extent that they wanted this this part of the purport to be removed, from this this purport here. So the feminists, this group, they're a little extremist also. So you mentioned also that Rabindra Swarup gave some kind of explanation. I'd really like to have that link for that, some kind of explanation to this purport. And then you said some devotee wrote also some 39-page clarification. So if you could share that again on WhatsApp, it would be very, very good.
I can share both the links with you. So Ravindra Sir Prabhu's lecture is on SoundCloud. I'll share the link to you. You can hear it in SoundCloud. So I think it's about 5 minutes. It's a short, he just talks about this topic. And the longer explanation, the context is essentially, there is a woman who is, I think she's, I get the sense she's from Mexico or some part of Latin American. So she's asking this question, that why is Prabhupada speaking like this? And the person who responds to it, he does a good job. He basically starts off by saying that that firstly you have to accept that Acharya is always right. So he first sets the mood that I don't think that Prabhupada is saying is anything wrong. Once you accept that, then he says, I can talk you through. So then he explains, why this statement is not insulting to women, how this statement should be taken. Basically, he has a lot of quotes from other lectures that Prabhupada has given and other purports that Prabhupada has written. Takes quite a bit of time to read it. It's fairly detailed. It's on some forum. I forget where it is. I should have the link to it, and I will. Let me see my notes while I'm talking. So while I'm looking at it, does anybody have any other questions?
Yes, just a comment from Krishna. When we say that Prabhupada reduced woman status sometime, but this in the purport of text 37, Prabhupada really glorified the woman's status. He said that the wife is the cause of all kind of success in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately salvation. When one accepts a wife, it is to be understood that he is being helped in his progressive march toward liberation. I mean, this is a glorification for a woman, because it's by, as you mentioned many times, that when you're in Grihastha ashram, you're protected, compare, and then the example you take about the highway, I like this very well. If you go on a highway at a high speed, when you make a crash, it's deadly. And compared to Grihastha is at a pace slower than on the highway. I like this analogy. Anyway, this is a big glorification for women, and we always say, no, behind every successful man, there's a woman. Almost the same thing.
So, thank you, Prabhu. I also was able to find the links. So I put them in the chat. The first one is the lecture by Ravindra Sir Prabhu, and the second is the post that I was talking about. Okay, so any other comments? Any other?
Just going back to the question about question actually, like I'm trying to think about this, the interaction between an object and the jiva. like in the example, the Puranjana is talking to Puranjani is a material intelligence, and the analogy we got is the car and the jiva, how they interact. So it looks like what Puranjani's role is like the mind of a jiva. Like when we see a car, it's our mind which is actually telling all those things. Oh, if I have this, it's nice. If I have that, that will be nice, and all those kinds of things. So it looks like that to me. More than the car itself is speaking, as you said, it's not speaking, but it's exhibiting all the wonderful qualities. But it's the mind which is actually speaking to the jiva. So I was thinking like that, and I don't know. It's an interesting way of seeing things, but
That's absolutely correct. I mean, you're absolutely right. We say the car is speaking to you, right? The car can't speak to you. The car is just sitting there. But when you look at it, it's your mind that speaks to you. Oh, this car goes 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. I need this. Essentially, the car is giving the opportunity for the mind to convince you about it. That's what material intelligence does. It's just sitting there. It has all these qualities, but it's just sitting there. It's jada. That's why in the allegory, it is looking for jiva. Jiva is consciousness. But it is Puranjan only who is considering that Puranjani is speaking to her. He's looking at the qualities, and it's Puranjan himself who is convincing himself about the qualities. It's the jiva who is convincing himself about the qualities of material intelligence. And one of the things that we'll study later on is that what this allegory does is it does a very good job in explaining the accountability. Right? In this whole story, there is only one actor. There's only one hero. That is Puranjan. Right? The jiva is the only person that is responsible for his fall down. Krishna is not responsible. Mahadev is not responsible. Some people say, what can I do? This is material nature. It's too powerful for me. Not true. Right? You have given control to the material nature, and that's why now you're under his control. Now you can't complain that material nature is too powerful. So these are the tattvas that get built in this story. We are catching on to it early because we are already trained to think like that. But Narad Muni is building it so that later on these tattvas they come up. He wants to make Prachina Bari take ownership of his responsibilities. Right. So yeah, very nice. Okay, so if there are no more points, I'll pause here and we'll continue next week. And tomorrow is Balram Jayanti, so wishing you all a wonderful Balram Jayanti. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you.